Okay, you can see we have a Sonar FS-2340 on the bench here. This one was sent in for modulation problems, and kind of like when you bring your car into the dealership and tell them, yeah, whatever's broken, and the mechanic walks out and it works fine. Well, this radio was the same way. I plugged it in, hooked it up, and hooked up just a bare bone stock Sonar microphone, so nothing special. Same exact kind of mic that would have come with this radio when it was brand new. It still has the original factory plug on the end, and it worked just perfect. Good modulation, good power. That's actually kind of a good thing, because that tells me it's nothing major's wrong. There's probably something loose or something shorted out or something like that. So in this video I want to cover, and it's a common problem, not only to this radio, and not even just to tube type radios, any radio. Doesn't have to be a CB, it can be a ham radio, hell, it can be a piece of industrial equipment for that fact. And the problems you're going to find are relays, like right there. Oh, and before I forget, Tram Doctor, if you watch this video, we had just been commenting not too long ago about, it seems to be all of the Sonar FS-2340s that I get in don't have the Nuvastor tube. They have the little solid state board. And you said pretty much everything you ever see always has the Nuvastor tube. You never see those little solid state boards. Here's another one. Perfect example. The little tiny, ungodly expensive Nuvastor tube is not there. There's a little tiny solid state circuit board on the underside. But in any case, back to the problem. So, first thing I'm thinking, modulation problems, check because this is a 2340, so this has dual modulation tubes, or dual audio tubes. So there's a 6BQ5 right here and a 6BQ5 right here. First thing to do, just try and jiggle them into sockets. And actually, when I did this one, nothing happened. But when I jiggle this one, every once in a while, if I was kind of halfway violent with it, something might, did the modulation just drop a little bit? Well, I think at one point in time I then accidentally bumped the relay, which would have been the next thing I'd have come over to. Because you have to remember, all of these tubes and this relay are in sockets. So actually, let me turn the radio off. Turn the AC power supply off there. So, and these can be a bear to get out sometimes, especially this style. Yeah, it has looks like a screw sticking out through the bottom of it. Goes into a mating pin there. They can be even harder to get out. Where the more modern replacements, a lot of times, don't have that screw or the stud sticking out at the bottom. And the new ones have the new manufacturer even have an LED in them. So anytime you key the radio, that little light lights up. Because these are very common in industrial equipment. And the reason they put those little LEDs in there is that way a technician is trying to troubleshoot a piece of pneumatic machinery or something like that. He doesn't need to be there to see the relay trip. He can just look from a distance and see the lights turning on and off. But in any case, sockets can become a problem. You can have loose pins, which isn't uncommon. Now, not so much with relays, because relays don't get pulled in and out that often. But with vacuum tubes, loose sockets can definitely become a problem in old equipment, that have had the tubes in and out of them God knows how many times over the years, how many sets of tubes have been in it. But relay sockets, you usually don't have loose pins, but you will have bad connections. So, I'm not sure which it was. So, it was either that or there were pins that were shorting out on the bottom, and I'll get it flipped over here in a minute and you can see the underside. But my procedure for cleaning like these sockets here, and the problem with these sockets is you really don't want to go spraying stuff in there, because on the bottom side these are pretty much enclosed. So any dirt that's in here in these sockets, if you try and clean them with cleaner, it's just going to push all that gunk into the bottom. And then especially if you use a blowgun, or it doesn't have a lot of pressure, it might actually just force the dirt down in farther. It might not actually blow it out. So what I like to do is alcohol. I'll take either little dispenser bottles, laboratory type dispenser bottles, and I'll take a cotton swab, grab one here, not a cotton swab but a foam swab. I'll completely saturate this and just run it over the socket, and kind of push down on it and force some of that alcohol down in there. Or, you know, if you have, because you don't want to just go taking a bottle of it and pouring it in, have it, you know, soaking all over your entire radio. Or I'll take these little needle bottles like this, okay? And I'll, you know, but I'll actually pour some down into, I'll lay a rag on the underside of the radio and actually kind of wrap a towel up around the wires on the underside. But I'll actually fill those sockets, and you'll see what I mean when you fill those up. It doesn't just disappear, like there's holes at the bottom, because like I say, the only holes there are on the bottom of this socket are where the terminal comes out the bottom. They're not big wide open holes, so that's why I say dirt can get trapped down in there. But what I'll do is I'll stick that in there, and I'll usually take an old relay and then just stick it in and out of the socket several times to try and clean some of that tarnish off of those pins. And then I'll take, but here's the trick, I don't try and blow stuff down in, because like I say, I want to remove any gunk that's in there. I use a vacuum cleaner. So I just take a vacuum cleaner. Actually, I don't need the crevice tool there. I'll just take a vacuum cleaner, turn it on, and stick it right on top of the socket. Like that, and vacuum it. The idea being, I'm sucking the dirt and any contaminants up and out of the socket. I'm not forcing them back down in. And so, you know, try and go side to side and back and forth, because, you know, if this is a pin socket, and you know it's completely covered by the vacuum port, it's not really sucking much, but once you get off to the side, what it can do is it starts to suck air in down here, and then it's going to suck air up through the other side of the socket, you know, for each one of those pins, and pull that dirt out. That's why I go back and forth, so you know, you try and get a little bit of turbulence down inside each of those holes. It'll suck, as the vacuum cleaner wand's going across the hole, as the edge of it starts to get exposed, it starts to suck air in down through that side of the cavity, and back up out the other side. But you want to get all that gunk out of there. So I did that on this radio. Actually, let me put, because it does not look like he needs a relay, so we'll just leave the original relay in it. There's no need to replace it if there's nothing wrong with it. That'd just be a waste of money. That relay can probably just hum along for decades more. We'll get her flipped over here. Oh, and whenever you're working on stuff like this and you have it turned on, especially old tube type equipment, you'll often see me setting it up on these bench cookies. Let me grab one of them. These little things. The reason I do that is it's not to protect the radio. I've got a nice spongy soft bench mat here, so I don't have to worry about scratching it with the bench mat. The reason I use these is, especially when I have the radios turned on, you have to remember the underside of this radio looks exactly like the top of it. It's a perforated, basically, screen for airflow. Well, if you take the bottom of this radio off with the 4 feet that are on the bottom that keep it up about that far up off the tabletop, and you now set this down on the table, there's no way for air to get in there anymore. And with no way for air to get in there, a lot of these components can start to get hot, especially any of these big resistors. So just a tip, set your radio up. Doesn't have to be bench cookie, it can be anything, but set it up on something so a little bit of air can get in and circulate if you're going to be working on it for any length of time. I think what might have actually been the problem was pins. Get the camera kind of pushed around here, being shorted out. And okay, just came into focus there. The problem with these ice cube relays is a lot of these pins, they're really close. And I think it was these and this number 51 line where it comes into another pin over there were shorted out, because this pin was kind of pushed over to the side, and if I reached up under the radio and jiggled the relay, I could actually see those two pins touching each other. So if you're ever in doubt about that, the easiest thing to do is, there's room to where you can kind of spread them out a little bit more. So what I do is take a pair of needle nose pliers, make sure you're before you do anything, of course, this is high voltage, make sure it's unplugged, and make sure all your large filter caps are discharged. So, you know, the big can cap over here in the corner, and especially these two, you know, the big can cap and this one, make sure they're discharged before you go doing anything with these radios. But like I say, what you can do is, and what I did to this one, is kind of pull these contacts back and away, pull these out to the side a little bit. Same thing as the ones over here, kind of pull them over that way, and then you can spread these center ones out a little bit so they're not so close together. Like I said, I really think that might have been the problem. It wasn't so much dirty contacts. I think it was actually a couple of these pins shorting out down here, you know, just bumped the radio. It was just enough for it to come over and just barely barely make contact, but it wasn't constant. It was one of those things that was really close, so sometimes it would be a short and sometimes it wouldn't. And you know, that can happen, especially with tube type equipment, because these go through drastic temperature changes. So, you know, as the radio heats up, as the tubes, you know, because there are all those tubes in there generating a lot of heat, this chassis heats up. Things can, as they expand and contract, things can move a little bit. So I think that might have actually been the problem, but that seems to have fixed it up. And we talked about that little circuit board on the top. Here it is from the underside. That's that little solid-state transistor board that replaced the Nuvastor tubes in the earlier versions of the 2340. But yeah, like I say, that seems to be the only thing I see nowadays. I haven't seen a 2340 with a Nuvastor tube for, God, I can't remember the last one. They're just all of the ones I seem to get here for repairs have the little solid-state board. It's been a while. So there you go. There's just a tip on relays. And same thing goes for tube sockets. You know, if you think you've got dirty contacts or whatnot, you can see the tube sockets here. They're kind of the same thing. You can see, get a little bit of extra light here. Of course, all the components are shadowing everything. There you go. But you see, if you put cleaner into these sockets, there's really no way for any, you know, now stuff that can be dissolved can leach out around you once it mixes in with your solvent, can leach out around the pin and come out the bottom. But if there's any actual dust or dirt in there, it's going to, by you blowing in it, you actually stand a chance of forcing that dirt farther down into the socket, and it's just eventually going to build up in there. So that's why I actually like to use the vacuum cleaner. Like I say, I'll fill it with alcohol, then I'll try and sop a little bit of that up, and then I go over it with the vacuum cleaner and actually try and pull that gunk up out of the sockets. So, cause like I say, they're enclosed, and the relay socket's exactly the same. They look just like this. There's no big holes when you put solvent in there for dirt to come out. So, you know, basically the dirt that goes in the top side needs to come back out the top side, because it can't come out the bottom side. So, there's just a few tips on cleaning and procedures. And like I say, you can get all kinds of weird problems when you have relay problems, because this is a good example. This relay is has 4 sets of contacts in there, okay? So it's actually doing 4 different things. Where in the heck did I put it? So I'll grab a schematic for one of them and actually show it to you. Let's see here. Got a small one printed out here. Now you can even see, like in your audio circuit, the audio comes out. Your audio goes through a... Whoop, does it help if I had the schematic down here in view of the camera, wouldn't it? But you can see your audio right here. If you follow the audio path, it comes up, your audio, once it comes out through the modulation circuit, comes out, it goes through a set of relay contacts. So if you're having a problem with the relay or just the socket or shorted pins on the bottom, that can kill the modulation. So definitely something to, and it wouldn't affect your speaker audio, because you can see for the speaker that's a different path. You're not modulating, you know, your final circuit. You know, the speaker basically you can see comes out and straight into the speaker here. Where if you're modulating your transmitted, you know, your carrier, that comes through a different path. So the modulation circuit uses one set of the contacts inside that relay. So if you're having modulation problems, you can always suspect that relay. But you can have all kinds of problems, because there's switching circuits for your high voltage. So anything with a relay, that's always a good thing to check first. If you have a spare relay, you can always try just plugging in a spare relay. If you continue to have problems, flip it over. Does it look like any of the pins are so close that they could possibly be shorting out? Another thing, and this looks like this is a factory radio, has never had anything done to it, which is nice. The modulation board's still in it, has never been touched, doesn't look like anything's ever been done to it other than a few tubes replaced. That's about it. So, you know, it hasn't been screwed with. But I can see melted wires, and it's from the factory, but this green wire specifically, and it may not show up in the camera very well, but these terminals right here originally were right about here, in line in the center of my pointer there. And you can see the melted spot on the side of the wire right there, and there's a matching spot on the other side. So, and these were also pushed over a little bit, because I kind of, when I bent these back, I spread it back and away, and that was to make room for this green wire. So like I say, you got to be really careful, because man, it's just, you've got a shitload of stuff coming into a really tight confined space here. It's so easy to get shorts and melted wires. You can even see there's some little melt spots in those wires right there. And it probably happened when they assembled this originally. That matter of fact, that was probably this ground wire. These wires were probably like that when they soldered all these shields together in this ground, and that, you know, slightly melted that. But so just be careful, and like I say, look to see, you might have a possible short down there. It's always possible.